All right, folks, buckle up. We're diving into the frosty mosh pit of 17th century Europe known as the First Northern War. Imagine a time before Netflix where the only entertainment was watching ambitious monarchs duke it out for land and glory. Thrilling, right? Picture this. The Baltic Sea, a chilly expanse of water surrounded by power-hungry nations. Sweden, a rising star, craved control of this watery trade route. Their neighbours, not so keen on the idea. Denmark, with its strategically placed tolls, wasn't about to surrender its cash cow. Poland-Lithuania, a sprawling giant, saw Sweden's ambition as a threat to its own Baltic interests. Russia, still figuring out this whole Tsardom thing, lurked on the periphery, eager to snatch up any scraps of power. So yeah, tensions were high. Add in a dash of religious rivalry, because why not? And you've got yourself a recipe for a good old-fashioned European war. Get ready for epic battles, shifting alliances, and enough historical drama to make Game of Thrones blush. Now, let's meet our contestants, shall we? In this corner, hailing from the land of Vikings and flat-pack furniture, it's Sweden. They might seem unassuming now, but back then they were led by a series of ambitious kings eager to turn their nation into a European powerhouse. Next up, we have Denmark-Norway. Think of them as the grumpy old neighbour who refuses to turn down the polka music. They'd controlled access to the Baltic for centuries, and they weren't letting go without a fight. And let's not forget the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. This vast kingdom, stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, was like the cool kid in school everyone wanted to be friends with. They had a king, a parliament, and a whole lot of land, making them a prime target for envious rivals. Last but not least, we have Russia. Still a bit of a wildcard at this point, but with a knack for showing up late to the party and causing chaos. They were led by Tsar Alexis, a ruler with big dreams of expanding his empire. The opening act of our Baltic drama kicks off in 1655. Sweden, led by the ambitious and slightly terrifying King Charles VIII Gustav, decides to throw the first punch. They invade the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, catching them completely off guard. It's a classic case of shock and awe. Swedish forces, known for their military prowess and snazzy uniforms, sweep through Poland like a particularly aggressive IKEA sale. The Poles, still trying to figure out what hit them, are forced to surrender chunks of their territory. It's a major victory for Sweden and a clear sign that they're a force to be reckoned with. But wait, there's more. Denmark, sensing an opportunity to capitalize on Poland's misfortune, decides to join the fray. They declare war on Sweden, hoping to reclaim some lost territory of their own. Bad move, Denmark, bad move. Enter Charles X Gustav, the Swedish king, with a flair for the dramatic. This guy was like the Alexander the Great of Scandinavia, a military genius with a serious case of wanderlust. When Denmark declared war, Charles didn't just retaliate, he went full-on Viking berserker. He marched his army across the frozen Great Belt Strait, catching the Danish forces completely off guard.
Yes, you heard that right. He marched an army across a frozen sea.
It was a move so audacious, so utterly bonkers, that it would make even the most hardened military strategists say, "Hold my mead." The Swedish invasion sent shockwaves through Europe. Charles, now nicknamed the Lion of the North, became a legend, albeit one with a penchant for risky military gambits. Hold my mead, the Polish-Swedish roller coaster of battles. Back in Poland, things were getting messy. The Poles, initially caught off guard, started to fight back, and let's just say, they weren't messing around. What followed was a series of battles like a historical game of ping-pong. One minute the Swedes were winning, the next the Poles were back on top. There were sieges, skirmishes, and enough intrigue to make your head spin.
One memorable moment involved the Polish city of Czestochowa. The Swedes laid siege, hoping for an easy victory, but they hadn't reckoned with the tenacity of the Polish defenders.
Czestochowa was home to the Jasna Gora monastery, a place of great significance. The defenders fought back fiercely, and the Swedes were forced to withdraw. Remember Denmark, our polka-loving neighbour from earlier? Well, they were having a bit of a rough time. After their initial blunder of declaring war on Sweden, things went from bad to worse. Charles X Gustav, fresh off his frozen sea adventures, turned his attention back to Denmark. He launched a series of attacks, culminating in the Battle of the Belts, a naval engagement that took place in the narrow straits separating Denmark's islands.
Now you might be thinking, a naval battle in the middle of winter? And you'd be right to be skeptical. The Baltic Sea in winter is about as hospitable as a polar bear with a toothache. But Charles, never one to shy away from a challenge, ordered his fleet to attack.
The battle was a chaotic mess, with ships colliding, cannons roaring, and sailors cursing in multiple languages. In the end, the Swedes emerged victorious, further cementing their dominance in the region. Denmark, battered and bruised, was forced to sue for peace, ceding even more territory to their increasingly powerful neighbour. By 1658, everyone was getting a little tired of the First Northern War. Sweden, while victorious, had overextended itself. Denmark was on the ropes, Poland was still licking its wounds, and Russia, well, they were just happy to be invited to the party at this point. So the exhausted combatants decided to take a break from all the fighting and do something radical. They negotiated. The result was the Treaty of Roskilde, signed in February 1658. This treaty was basically a Swedish victory lap. Denmark was forced to give up even more territory, effectively becoming a Swedish puppet state. Poland lost significant land, and Sweden was sitting pretty as the new regional superpower. Peace had finally arrived in the Baltic, but as we all know from watching too many historical dramas, peace treaties signed after exhausting wars are about as durable as a cheap lawn chair. Nobody expects the second Danish invasion, except everyone in the 17th century. Just when you thought it was safe to go back into the Baltic, Denmark pulled a surprising move. In 1658, just a few months after signing the Treaty of Roskilde, they decided to have another go at this whole fighting Sweden thing.
Now, you might be thinking, Denmark, are you insane? You just got your butts handed to you? And you'd be right. It was a risky move, bordering on suicidal. But Denmark had a secret weapon: Dutch support. The Netherlands, fearing Sweden's growing power, decided to throw their weight behind the Danes.
The second Danish invasion, as it became known, was a desperate gamble. Denmark, with the help of their Dutch allies, managed to recapture some lost territory. But it was a short-lived victory. Sweden, initially caught off guard by Denmark's unexpected resurgence, quickly regrouped.
Charles X. Gustaf, never one to back down from a challenge, launched a counterattack.
But this time, things were different. The other European powers, realizing that Sweden was getting a little too big for its britches, decided to intervene. The Holy Roman Empire, Brandenburg, Prussia, and even the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, remember them, joined forces to push back against Sweden. It was like a 17th century version of the Avengers, assembling to take down a common enemy.
The tide of the war began to turn. Sweden, facing a united front, found itself outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The dream of a Swedish Baltic Empire was fading faster than a cheap tan.
By 1660, everyone was thoroughly exhausted with the First Northern War. Charles X. Gustaf, the once mighty Lion of the North, had died a year earlier, leaving Sweden in the hands of his young son. The warring parties, realizing that nobody was going to win this thing decisively, decided to head back to the negotiating table. This time they were determined to hammer out a lasting peace. The result was the Treaty of Oliva, signed in 1660. This treaty, while not as one-sided as the Treaty of Roskilde, marked the end of Sweden's unchallenged dominance in the Baltic. Denmark got back some of its lost territory, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth regained its independence, and Sweden, while still a powerful player, had been put in its place. Lasting impacts on the Baltic landscape. The First Northern War might seem distant, but its impact on Europe was significant. It ended Denmark's dominance, paving the way for Sweden to rise. The war weakened the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, leading to its decline. So there you have it, folks. The First Northern War changed Europe, showing that even cold regions can heat up.